Each of us, with the exception of people from sub-Saharan Africa, has a part of another long-extinct species. This part is a genetic imprint carried by our cells. Our ancestors, who left Africa about 70,000 years ago, encountered Neanderthals in the vast expanses of Eurasia. This encounter was not only a competition for resources, but also an exchange that left us with an invisible but important legacy. In recent years, paleogenetics has made a huge leap forward, and we can now see how these ancient genes affect our daily lives. We will dive into the world of paleogenetics, where each section of DNA is a page from the great book of human history. We will learn why some of us are more resistant to infections, while others are more prone to allergies. All this is thanks to the ancient legacy we received from our extinct relatives. Watch the video to the end to learn how Neanderthal Code helps us fight infections and why our ancestors adapted so easily to life outside Africa. Do you know what is most surprising about our history? It is not that we survived, but that we became who we are thanks to others. About 60,000 years ago, our ancestors, Homo sapiens, began their great journey from Africa. And in Eurasia, they met the owners of these lands, Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis. This encounter was one of the most important moments in human history. It wasn't just about conflict and displacement, it was about survival. We did not simply interbreed, we took from them what helped us survive in harsh, unfamiliar conditions. And today, these gifts from the past are still with us. Every non-African has about 2% Neanderthal genes in their DNA. It's not much, but that 2% is incredibly important. These aren't just museum pieces in our cells. They are active code that affects us right now. Imagine that you carry a piece of the ancient world within you. This piece is the result of thousands of years of evolution in the cold conditions of Eurasia. And now it is in us, Homo sapiens. But how do we know which genes are Neanderthal and which are ours? And why are they still working? Geneticists call this introgression, the transfer of genetic material from one species to another. Thanks to the decoding of the Neanderthal genome in 2010, we were able to compare it with the genome of modern humans and find these common sections. Scientists have discovered that Neanderthal genes influence everything from our immunity to our appearance. For example, some genes responsible for skin and hair color were probably borrowed from Neanderthals, allowing our ancestors to better adapt to lower levels of ultraviolet radiation in northern latitudes. The same applies to genes associated with disease resistance. Encountering new pathogens in Eurasia would have been fatal without this genetic shield. It seems that Neanderthals passed on to us a kind of genetic upgrade, a crash course in survival in a harsh climate. These genes helped Homo sapiens to colonize new territories more quickly and adapt to completely unfamiliar environments. Interestingly, we are still finding new traces of this heritage. Recent studies show that Neanderthal genes may even influence our circadian rhythms, making us more morning people. Have you ever thought that part of your appearance or even your personality might have been inherited from Neanderthals? Write about it in the comments. One of the most significant traces of Neanderthal heritage is our immune genes. When our ancestors left Africa, they encountered completely new pathogens to which they had no immunity. Neanderthals, who had lived in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, had developed effective ways to protect themselves. When our ancestors interbred with them, they inherited not just genes, but whole packages of ready-made solutions for fighting disease. For example, genes encoding toll-like receptor proteins. These receptors are our body's first line of defense. They recognize foreign pathogens and trigger an immune response. The Neanderthal variants of these genes proved to be particularly effective against viruses and bacteria common in Eurasia. This acquisition was a decisive advantage. Without this Neanderthal immune shield, our ancestors might not have survived. But there is a downside to this gift. Some of these genes are now linked to an increased risk of allergies and autoimmune diseases. Our bodies, tuned to an aggressive response, sometimes begin to attack their own cells. Did you know that some people who suffer from pollen allergies may have Neanderthal roots? I wonder how many more diseases and physical characteristics of modern humans can be explained by ancient genes. And how do these ancient genes affect our lives today? In addition to influencing the immune system, Neanderthal genes played a role in adapting to cold climates. For example, genes responsible for fat metabolism helped our ancestors better store energy to survive in harsh winter conditions. This was critical for migration to cold regions. These genes are still active today, and in some people, they can influence a predisposition to obesity or diabetes. Equally interesting is the role of Neanderthal genes in shaping the appearance of modern humans. Scientists suggest that the genes responsible for skin and hair color were inherited from Neanderthals, allowing our ancestors to better adapt to less sunlight. This helps synthesize vitamin D, which is necessary for bone health. The influence of these genes can still be seen today in the variety of skin and hair colors among people around the world. But what if our Neanderthal heritage carries not only physical traits, but behavioral ones as well? Could they have passed on something that affects our circadian rhythms, mood, or even risk-taking tendencies? Our Neanderthal heritage is not limited to immunity. It affects much more unexpected things. For example, your sleep. Scientists have found that people with Neanderthal circadian rhythm genes are more likely to have an evening chronotype. This means that it is harder for them to get up early and easier to stay awake late. This gene variant was probably an adaptation to less intense sunlight at high latitudes. If you are a night owl, it may be the Neanderthal in you. Another legacy is skin and hair. Genes that affect pigmentation also came to us from Neanderthals. They helped our ancestors better adapt to ultraviolet light. Some Europeans and Asians have genes associated with light skin tone, which helps synthesize vitamin D in conditions of insufficient sunlight. Others have genes associated with thicker and denser skin that protects against the cold. And now for the most interesting part. Some researchers link Neanderthal genes to how our skin reacts to pain. Variants that affect nerve receptors may have been useful in harsh conditions, but today they can lead to increased sensitivity to cold. These genes are a kind of thermostat inherited from our ancestors who lived during the Ice Age. And if you've ever wondered why you have red hair or a tendency to get freckles, that may also be a Neanderthal legacy. Our ancient relatives probably had a more diverse gene pool than we thought. It was these genes, which affect hair and skin color, that help them survive in harsh climatic conditions. Neanderthal heritage carries not only obvious adaptive traits, it also influences subtle but important details of our physiology. For example, our skin's ability to heal wounds. Scientists have discovered that some genes inherited from Neanderthals accelerate the blood clotting process. This feature could have been vital for survival in conditions of frequent injuries and collisions. Today, the same mechanism may explain the increased risk of thrombosis in some people. This is an amazing example of how long-extinct species continue to influence us on a genetic level. Understanding this legacy helps us not only shed light on the past, but also better understand our own bodies, their reactions, and predispositions. Every time we look at our freckles or experience increased sensitivity to cold, we see echoes of the ancient world in which our ancestors lived. These small genetic gifts are living proof of our complex and rich history. So, Neanderthal genes gave us adaptations, but there was a price to pay. We've already talked about allergies, but the list is much longer. Some of these genes are now linked to an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. In the primitive world, this was a useful gene, helping to store fat during times of abundance in order to survive during times of famine. But in the modern world, where food is readily available, it becomes a risk factor. In addition, our Neanderthal heritage affects our blood clotting. Some of us have inherited genes that make our blood more prone to clotting. In ancient times, this was a lifesaver when we were injured, allowing our blood to clot faster and prevent blood loss. But today it increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Another interesting fact is obesity. Several genes inherited from Neanderthals are now linked to an increased tendency to gain weight. Again, it's the same story. An adaptation for survival in the past has become a problem in the present. This is a classic example of evolutionary mismatch. Our bodies, shaped to fight for survival in harsh conditions, are now forced to exist in a world where abundance has become the norm. Our Neanderthal heritage also has implications for inflammatory processes in the body. Some of the inherited genes make the immune system more reactive. In the past, this helped to quickly fight off pathogens, but today it can lead to chronic inflammation and autoimmune diseases. Scientists suggest that these genes may have been passed down to us to help us adapt to new types of microbes that our ancestors encountered when they migrated from Africa to Eurasia. These discoveries show that our genetic past is not just a museum relic, but an active participant in our present. It continues to shape our predisposition to certain diseases, and by studying it, we gain the key to understanding our own health. But how can we be sure that all these genes are Neanderthal? Let's talk about it now. Let's figure out how we can even make such conclusions. It all started in 2010 when the Neanderthal genome was completely decoded. Scientists led by Svante Pääbo, who received the Nobel Prize for this, were able to compare Neanderthal DNA with the DNA of modern humans. It was like discovering an ancient manuscript written in a long-forgotten language. They discovered that people of non-African descent have common DNA segments that are not found in people whose ancestors remained in Africa. This was indisputable evidence of interbreeding. After this discovery, a real boom in research began. Thousands of scientists around the world began comparing our genes with those of Neanderthals. They were looking not only for individual genes, but also for their functions. By studying which proteins these genes encode and how they interact, scientists were able to understand their role in our bodies. And the results were stunning. We didn't just get junk DNA, but fully functional adaptive mechanisms. Research has shown that these genes were not random. Our ancestors selected the specific DNA segments that helped them survive in the new, harsher conditions of Eurasia. This was made possible by natural selection. People who inherited useful Neanderthal genes were better adapted to the cold, new diseases, and unfamiliar food, and therefore had a better chance of leaving offspring. Today, thanks to new technologies, we can not only compare genomes, but also reconstruct their history. Scientists are creating complex computer models that show how these genes spread across the planet. It's like solving a huge puzzle, where every little piece of DNA helps us understand how modern humans were formed. This is a fascinating journey into our genetic past, which continues to reveal more and more secrets. That is why we can now speak with confidence about the connection between our genes and our Neanderthal heritage. Why did our ancestors interbreed with Neanderthals in the first place? Some scientists believe that it was a beneficial acquisition. Imagine you arrive in a new land. You have your strengths, but also your weaknesses. Neanderthals, on the other hand, had been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. Their genes had been refined by evolution. In essence, it was an evolutionary shortcut. Instead of waiting hundreds of thousands of years for our genes to adapt to new conditions, we simply took ready-made solutions from those who were already adapted. It was a quick and effective way to survive and spread across the planet. But was all of our Neanderthal heritage useful? No, many genes were simply discarded by natural selection. Our DNA is not just a collection of random genes. Many researchers suggest that interbreeding was not just a matter of survival. Perhaps it was part of more complex social interactions. Our ancestors and Neanderthals probably didn't just coexist, but also interacted with each other. Some scientists believe that gene mixing may have occurred over thousands of years, in different places and under different circumstances. Interestingly, genes related to the reproductive system were mostly rejected. Geneticists have found that modern humans have almost no Neanderthal DNA on the Y chromosome and in some parts of the X chromosome. This suggests that interbreeding was not always successful in terms of reproduction. Perhaps the offspring of such unions were less fertile or had other problems, leading to the gradual disappearance of these genes from the gene pool. This is one of the main mysteries. Why did some genes take root and others did not? Modern research using computer modeling and DNA analysis shows that our ancestors could not do without their Neanderthal heritage. Without it, it would have been much more difficult for them to adapt to the new conditions in Eurasia. However, even beneficial genes could have side effects. For example, genes that help fight infections can also make the immune system overly active, which today leads to allergies and autoimmune diseases. This is the result of strict selection. So why have some genes that seem harmful to us today remained in our genome? We'll tell you about it in a minute. Our genome is not a dumping ground. If a gene is not useful, it disappears over time. So why do we still carry these problematic genes? The reason is most likely that they were incredibly useful in the past. Imagine living in conditions where every day is a struggle for survival. The risk of diabetes at age 50 is not a problem when most people don't even live to see 30. Much more important is the ability to survive a year of famine. The example of type 2 diabetes shows how a gene that is beneficial in one context becomes harmful in another. This gene helped our ancestors make efficient use of every calorie they ate. Today, when calories are in excess, it leads to obesity and diabetes. This suggests that our evolution has not stopped. We are still under the pressure of natural selection. It's just that now it doesn't work with mammoths and cave bears, but with modern diseases and lifestyles. These genes, which we now consider bad, are actually evidence of evolutionary adaptation. They were extremely important for the survival of our ancestors. Neanderthals passed on genes that helped us quickly colonize new territories, defend ourselves against unfamiliar viruses, and even tolerate cold better. Today, in conditions of abundance and accessible medicine, these genes have not only lost their relevance, but have also become a source of problems. They remind us that evolution is not a perfect process. It is a constant compromise between what is needed now and what may be harmful in the future. The Neanderthal genome is not just a set of genes, it is a story. A story of how two different species, once separated, met again. It is a story of survival and adaptation. Our shared heritage tells us that we are not so unique. We are not a pure line, separate from everyone else. We are the result of mixing, and that makes our history even more fascinating. We carry pieces of all our ancestors, including those we considered simply extinct relatives. And this applies not only to Neanderthals. Genetic research shows that we also interbred with other, even more mysterious species, such as the Denisovans. Our genetic tree is not a straight line, but a complex branched bush where the branches intertwine. Denisovan genes, for example, played a key role in the adaptation of Tibetans to high-altitude conditions. This is further evidence that interbreeding was not a random event, but an important element of evolution. This heritage allows us to survive in the most diverse corners of the planet, from snow-capped mountains to hot deserts. Each of us, depending on our origins, carries a piece of this ancient genetic heritage. Thus, the past literally lives on in us, influencing our health, appearance, and even our character. This is incredible evidence that our evolutionary journey was much more complex and interesting than we could have imagined. What else could we have gotten from Neanderthals? Maybe not just genes, but cultural knowledge too. Even though we can't prove it with DNA, we know that our ancestors could have picked up hunting techniques, tool making, or even some knowledge about plants and animals from them. After all, as we know, Neanderthals were very intelligent. They knew how to make complex tools, they cared for their elderly and sick, and perhaps even buried their dead. All of this points to a developed culture. And if we interbred with them, it is quite possible that we learn from them. After all, why reinvent the wheel when it already exists? The exchange of knowledge is also a form of heritage, but it is more difficult to trace. Recent archaeological finds show that Neanderthals used resin and glue to make tools, which required complex technological skills. Moreover, they knew how to make jewelry and may even have been involved in rock painting. This refutes old ideas about them as crude, undeveloped creatures. It is very likely that our ancestors learned some of these skills from them. This cultural exchange, like the genetic one, shaped us as a species, making our development faster and more efficient. So what does all this mean for us living in the 21st century? It means that our history is much richer and more complex than we are used to thinking. We are not just descendants of Homo sapiens. We are a mosaic of different species that once existed. And this knowledge can help us not only to better understand our past, but also our future. Understanding how ancient genes affect our health can help us develop new drugs and treatments. And this is just the beginning. Every day, scientists make new discoveries that reveal new pages of history to us. Our genetic heritage is not just a set of letters in our DNA, it is a living history that continues to influence our lives. This new understanding of our origins also challenges outdated notions of human races. Genetic differences between so-called races pale in comparison to our shared Neanderthal and Denisovan heritage, which most people outside of Africa possess. We are not as different from each other as we think, and our shared past connects us all. Realizing this is a powerful tool for strengthening unity and mutual understanding between people. It reminds us that we are all part of one big, complex, and incredibly interesting evolutionary experiment. We have learned that the Neanderthal code within us is not just a curious fact, but a real set of genes that determine our responses to disease, skin characteristics, and even how we sleep. This legacy is the result of an ancient interbreeding that allowed our ancestors to survive and thrive in a new world. But if Neanderthal genes have helped us so much, could we find traces of other ancient species within ourselves that we don't even know about yet? Did you like this topic? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our new videos.